Brittney Griner is one of the most important athletes ever to play at Baylor, and this is her weekend. And this is Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by FanDuel. I'm your host, Cam Stewart, joined by the great Rick May, former Lady Bears broadcaster for 22 years. He has seen it all in this business with this team. He thanks you for making it your first listen today and every day. And today, of course, we are previewing the big weekend ahead for the Lady Bears as they take on Texas Tech this Sunday. And more importantly, the day that Brittney Griner gets her jersey raised to the rafters at the Foster Pavilion. So before we get there, Rick, just tell me about what that reaction was like from you a couple weeks ago when it was finally announced that finally Brittney Griner was going to get her number 42 retired.
I was so happy for Brittney, so deserving. What all she has meant to the program, what all she has done since then, she's a Baylor Bear, always will be.
Yeah. And you saw it all in there. I already said that, but you did from 96 to 2018. So we're talking like the advent of the Big 12, the hiring of this hotshot young coach, the former La Tech point guard, Kim Mulkey Robertson, and then the national championships. But let's go in somewhere in the middle there. Around 2008 is when Brittney Griner commits to Baylor. This was, she was unanimously the number one recruit in the entire nation. One of the first real phenoms of women's basketball that people really paid attention to at the high school level. So when Brittney signs on, talk about the hype that is surrounding her and what that meant to the program at the time.
Well, it was big for the program because we needed a big girl. And just the hype that she had being, the number one recruit, everybody wanted to sign Brittney Griner. And in fact, I think her dad had a lot to do with her signing at Baylor. He wanted her to be with a coach that was a disciplinarian and was good with the kids. And Kim Mulkey fit that perfectly. So I think her dad had a little something to do with that. We were certainly excited to know she was coming.
Yeah, and when we talk about how big it is for Baylor, but specifically for what you mentioned there, Kim Mulkey, she already had a national championship. It's not like this was the early days, but they were still kind of finding their footing in terms of that sustained success that came after, which we'll talk about later. But how big was that for Baylor fans and for Kim Mulkey of, we already have a national championship, and now she is bringing in the very best talent in the entire country.
Well, I think that national championship actually helped bring in the talent because people wanted to play. They want to play for a winner, and they wanted to play with Kim Mulkey. She, in 5 years, wins the national championship, and look what she's done at LSU in 2 years. But for Baylor to come from where we were to where we were after that national championship, that meant everything. And I think that helped get Brittney on board too.
Yeah. And we talk about it with women's basketball, but even just the scope of Baylor athletics at the time, it's just that one tournament appearance for men's basketball. They were certainly on the up and up, but hadn't gotten there yet. Football had just hired Art Briles. So again, off in the distance, right? And so this was allowing for Baylor to have that program to really, really hang their hat on.
One of the things that was used back then, and I thought it was a perfect example, was, they tried to make the Lady Bears as the shining light of Baylor University. Yeah. And I think at that time, certainly we were the shining light of the university, and not that everybody else wasn't, but what we were doing in that program, what they did in that program was just, it really shined a light on the university as people looked in from the other side.
Yeah. And do you remember the first time you talked to Brittney? Obviously we talked about all of the hype that came with it, or just one of those first moments where you knew she was going to be a star?
I think before her very first game, we had a little conversation. Her first game was at Tennessee, and Brittney had deer in the headlight look going into that game. I mean, it was Tennessee, Pat Summitt, on their floor.
They had just won the last 2 national championships, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
So it was, a big stage to start off with, and Brittney was a little bit with a deer in the headlight look. And Pat Summitt, being as good a coach as she is, she always ran a man-to-man defense. But that day, she started off with a zone defense, and they packed it in the paint on Brittney. And she had a decent game by anybody's standards, but not nearly what she turned out to be later on. That was a good start for her, though. But we lost that game, but that kind of set the stage.
Yeah. And it is funny that Pat Summitt certainly knew a lot about Brittney Griner. She was hard on the recruiting trail. And that's kind of one of the things we were talking about in that, like back then, Baylor had the ring, of course, and Kim was doing a great job, but this is Pat Summitt we're talking about. This is Tennessee, like Baylor wasn't winning those battles. And so that's huge. And I want to take you back to, I believe it was just a couple weeks later at the Farrell Center where Brittney dunks for the first time. And we knew she could do it. We knew she could do it. But when that moment happens, what was the arena like?
Electric. Everybody nobody had seen that before.
Yeah.
And so Brittney comes in and has a one-handed dunk, and it was just, she was right underneath the basket, got the ball, just put it up there and in, and everybody was astonished, excited, and the arena just lit up at that point. It was really exciting.
And did you know then that we were in for what we were in for? One of the greatest college basketball players ever, and a couple of trips to the Final Four.
I hoped we would be. It kind of set the stage. Hey, this is something different. We're going to be pretty good, especially with her. And certainly it turned out that way.
And before we kind of get into the personal side of Brittney Griner, I mean, just looking at the numbers and the accomplishments, I mean, we could go all day, Rick. I'm not going to do that. But 2 straight years, her junior and senior year, sweeps the major awards, all the national players of the year. I believe she's one of just a handful of players ever to have 2,000 points and 900 career blocks. Like, just incredible numbers. Obviously, they go to the Final Four in her that is a freshman year, 2010. Freshman year, yeah. And then 2 years later, the 40-0, the national championship. I want to take you back to that night when they complete the 40-0 season. Was that just kind of a look how far we've made it moment, not just for her, but for this program?
Yeah, I think so. Having been to the Final Four and we lost out to UConn in San Antonio in that first game, that kind of, I guess, wet the whistle that we wanted more. The team wanted more, and getting to that 40-0 mark was really an accomplishment. But as we got through the regular season, the pressure started to build, and every game there was more pressure. 6 games to the national championship, and every game was bigger for us, and the pressure was more on. And by the time we got to the Final Four, I mean, there was a lot of pressure. But getting that final game, the win, was just absolutely fantastic. And it kind of let the pressure off, and hey, we did it.
Yeah, and you talk about it there, and it's kind of undersold now because, I mean, other teams have gone undefeated, but it wasn't UConn. It wasn't Tennessee. Right. It was this still kind of a new kid on the block in terms of the national scale. And it's one after the other. They've got the best player. They've got one of the best coaches. And it's just one after the other to get all the way to 40-0. And you talk about the pressure mounting. Was there anyone else as a star player at that time who really could have handled it the way Brittney did and got the team to the promised land? Not that I know of.
I mean, Odyssey did a great job. There were others on the team that were doing a great job, but it was Brittney. She made the cart go. And I will say this: other teams had gone 39-0. UConn, nobody had ever gone 40-0, and we were the first to do that.
Which is just nice round numbers.
Yes, it is.
40-0. That feels good. Yeah.
I loved it. Yeah.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And what we're trying to get to you is to make that first bet a layup, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with things like quick bets, the live same game parlays, exclusive props. I'm betting on Jason Tatum over on the points all the time, and he's usually winning me a lot of money. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to shoot your shot. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. So looking at, we looked at Brittney the player and all the great accomplishments, and we can see that. We can see that on the national championship banners. We can read about it in the history books. But I think what a lot of people need to know about is the personal side of Brittney, especially now, where she's, through no fault of her own, really has become kind of a divisive figure. So you knew Brittney these 4 years. You saw her as kind of the deer in the headlights, and then you saw her as the talisman of the national championship at 40-0. So just tell me about some of your personal experiences with Brittney and your relationship with Brittney.
Well, Brittney was always fun loving. She was a kid that age. She was having fun. She was a jokester. She loved to ride the longboard around the campus. I mean, everybody knew who Brittney was, just seeing her riding the longboard, and somebody that tall. She was just one of those that everybody liked being around. She liked to have fun and made others have fun. And she was laughing and joking. When it got time to get serious about a game, she could do that too. But she was a fun-loving kid, and I enjoyed being around her.
And is there any story that you think really signifies who Brittney is from your guys' time together that you can tell on the podcast anyway?
Oh, there's a lot of them. I asked Kim Mulkey one time about her riding the longboard, and because I thought, if she was to break an arm or a leg or something, we would be hurt for a while. And Kim said, "No, I don't have any problem with it." And it wasn't long after that, Brittney had an accident on the longboard, and I think she hurt her arm. Not too bad that she couldn't play, but she was hurting. So I think that kind of slowed that down a little bit. But you weren't going to take the longboard away from Brittney. But that was always scary, I thought.
And I would love to hear more about this Kim Mulkey, Brittney Griner relationship from where you see it, because, obviously there's much made of it in the media, sure. But you have these two, Kim's the disciplinarian, very old school. She'll always admit that, but is very beloved by her players. And now you have Brittney Griner, who is the new kid on the block. She can't hide from anybody. She is very comfortable in her own skin, as you talk about with the longboard and her fun-loving attitude. So how did that relationship kind of work out while you guys were there?
Well, Kim was actually very defensive of Brittney. Brittney got a lot of scorn from other schools when we went there. They wanted to try to intimidate her, the team, the fans, and some ugly things were said from time to time, and Kim was always very defensive of Brittney and tried to protect her as much as she could, and actually sat down and talked with her about it. Don't read the message boards and all this stuff that was going on. But that's I'm sure LeBron James has people talk about him.
Yeah.
But she did a good job, I thought, of doing her best to protect Brittney.
And kind of building off of that a little bit, we talk about Brittney can't hide.
No.
She's almost 7 feet tall. She's photographed everywhere she goes, and she even stands out amongst her own teammates, right?
Yes.
And so you mentioned it there, and I mean, it was nasty wherever she went, and I mean, obviously we still see it today, but just the ugly things that were thrown her way, and insults, and on the internet and in person.
Yeah.
And did you see that ever take a toll on her? Because it does seem like she's always been so comfortable.
No, I don't think it did. And I think she even said she reads the message boards and uh, what people say. But I never really saw it bother her that much at all. Uh, Maybe in a game or so, something would happen that would get her upset. But no, she did a really good job of handling all of that.
Yeah, and you and Lori, who would do the games with you, you guys were always kind of around this. Did you ever, feel for her, like having to go through
Absolutely,
this every time?
absolutely. For 4 years, I felt for her. It was just one of those things that, I guess it was with the times, and maybe it's even worse sometimes today. But people can be rude, and I think a lot of them maybe don't mean it to come out as bad as it does. But we always were aware of that wherever we went. But on the other side of that, wherever we went to Morgantown, West Virginia, Lawrence, Kansas, Kansas State, and Manhattan, various places that we went. After games, the fans would crowd around our bus, waiting for Brittney to come out of the locker room, and they all wanted to get a picture with her, get her to sign an autograph, just talk with her. And we would have to go out and get Brittney. All right, come on, we got to go. Plane's waiting for us, But the fans were there. Maybe some of them were saying ugly things in the arena, but no, after the game, everybody wanted their picture with Brittney or get to meet Brittney. And it was, I don't know, it was like the Beatles were there or something. She was the star, no doubt about it.
The Beatles of women's college basketball.
Yeah,
I'll roll
Brittney
with
Griner.
that. Yeah, I'll take that. And looking back on it, obviously I mentioned it, but she's still getting all these kinds of this hate, and we'll see it this weekend, unfortunately, too. But the thing that stands out to me outside on her, bio for Baylor is not just all these accomplishments, and what she did in high school was unbelievable. But I look back at the final things of the personal part of her bio. Mm-hmm. While she was at Baylor, volunteered with Salvation Army, Waco Zoo, Waco's Gospel Cafe, South Waco Recreation Center, and Woodway Family Center, and a frequent speaker at local schools. So tell me about that part, about the impact that Brittney had on this community far removed from the basketball court.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because there was a lot more than just the basketball player there. There was Brittney, the human being. There was Brittney, the, does the wonderful things that you just mentioned, and was very happy to do it. I don't know where she found the time to do all that she did do. I wouldn't have had that kind of time, but she made the time. And I think this town loved Brittney Griner. All the Baylor fans really, really loved Brittney Griner. And it was because of those things. And naturally, the way she played on the floor. What she brought to the team, what she brought to the city, what she brought to Baylor University. She was good for Baylor University and good for us.
And last few things for me, but first being, is there a story or just something about Brittney's character that you wish more people knew about her? Kind of like what we were talking about with the volunteering.
I think the fun-loving part, and what a good kid she is. People don't see that don't know her. They don't know what she's like, behind the scenes. And she was just like all the other 20-year-old girls that was having fun and winning championships and, playing great basketball. But she was just fun-loving and just had a great personality. I didn't know anybody that knew her that didn't love Brittney Griner. I will tell you one story that I thought was all of her accomplishments. She scored 50 in a game against Kansas State to set the single game scoring record. She passed Andrea Riley to set the scoring record for the Big 12 in women's basketball. The dunks that she had that set records. But speaking of that, she was in the locker room getting in the training room getting her ankles taped before a game, and I walked in there and I saw her there, and I just offhanded said, Brittney, Nobody has ever dunked 3 times in a game. No female has ever done that. They've done it twice. Nobody's done it 3 times. Just saying. Well, that game, she went out and she dunked 3 times to become the first woman to do that. And after the third dunk, she ran by where I was sitting and pointed at me. And so I was kind of proud. Maybe I had a little something to do with that.
Sounds like it. Yes, that was in tribute. Last question from me is, if you could give Brittney a message this weekend ahead of what's supposed to be a very emotional day, Sunday at the Foster Pavilion, what would that message be?
It would be that I love you, we love you, and couldn't happen to a better person. Brittney Griner deserves to have her number retired.
So deserve it. Yes. Rick, thank you so much for joining us. Rick May, former Lady Bears, voice of the Lady Bears through all of Brittney Griner's time with Baylor. Rick, thank you so much.
Good to be with you.
Today's episode of Locked On Baylor is also brought to you by Gametime. Look, obviously, if you're listening, you're a huge sports fan. You're looking to get out to the Foster Pavilion this weekend for Brittney Griner's jersey retirement ceremony. Best place to go, Gametime. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed at that. It's got the best options for those last minute tickets, and even up till an hour after tip off, you can still find a ticket on Gametime. Okay. You don't have any of that hidden fees that you're getting in every other website. You get to see the views from your seat and the price that you will pay before you actually hit purchase. That's why Gametime is the best for anytime tickets, but especially as we come up on game time, no pun intended. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Use the ticket code Vegas100 for $100 off a big game ticket. Or if you're not going to the big game, you could use the code Locked On for $20 off that first purchase. That's code Locked On, LOCKEDON, for $20 off that first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Download Gametime today. And thanks so much to Rick May once again for hopping on the pod today. I thought great insight and great stories. You know, we can look at the banners and the numbers and the records. We all know that stuff about Brittney Griner, but to hear from someone who was kind of with her in that journey from day one, it was really cool. So special thanks to Rick for that. Looking at the men's side of things, as they also play this weekend, ladies play Texas Tech on Sunday at 3. The men take on West Virginia up in Morgantown, another homecoming for Jalen Bridges, who had a pretty good game there last year when the fans were giving it to him. That was a Baylor victory. This year, it should be another one because we know West Virginia, no bueno. Not good. Now, I will say this. West Virginia has given teams trouble this year. Some teams have jammed their toes against the Mountaineers. I mean, we know kind of how the story went with the late spring, early summer, and Bob Huggins gets unceremoniously dismissed, and players are leaving, and they don't really have a chance for West Virginia doesn't really have a chance to bring guys in through the transfer portal. So I kind of made the joke earlier this season, but I think it's true. If West Virginia had the option to opt out of this season, I think they would have. And they just play in one of the best, if not the best, conference ever, this year's Big 12. And it did not start swimmingly. They lost by like 30 to Houston. But a couple games later, they did the unthinkable. They won a conference game. They beat the Texas Longhorns at home. They play a little bit better at home. And then a week after that, they did the really unthinkable. Once again, at home, they beat Kansas. They scored 91 points against Kansas. That's 30 more than Baylor scored against Kansas, and beat the Jayhawks. Like, unbelievable. I think Kansas was like 3 at the time. They're still only like 6. So just incredible upset. And so you're like, can West Virginia play in this league? Can they turn this around and get some wins out of it? The answer has been no. That game was on January 20th. As I bring this to you on February 16th, they've won 1 game since. They lost at UCF, they lost to Oklahoma State, which is that team up there. West Virginia is the worst. They did beat Cincinnati at home again. So all 3 of their conference wins are at home. And then got shellacked by UT in the grudge match in Austin last Saturday. I think they lost, I think it was 36 points they lost by, and then just got blown out by TCU again on Monday. So Still not a good basketball team, but have given some teams trouble at home. And what I'm looking at from the Baylor side is the dreaded 2-word term when you come and play a team that's not very good, and that is trap game. Okay? Baylor is staying out on the road. They next play Tuesday at BYU, which I'm going to talk more about the beginning of the week next week, but I am concerned about that game. BYU has hung around. They're still good. And they didn't like the way that game against Baylor went last time. Remember, Mark Pope wasn't too fond of the new Big 12 officials that he got to encounter at the Foster Pavilion. And so there's that, but there's also the fact that it's altitude, which please don't take that lightly. Like, that is something that these players have not played in, these Baylor players, and now all of a sudden they got to go and do it. I wish they would have scheduled a game in like Denver or something in the non-conference, but that has been a struggle for teams that are going up, Big 12 teams that are going up there for the first time. BYU has defended their home court pretty well in this conference, save a bad loss to Cincinnati. They've been pretty good at home and pretty solid overall. So I'm looking at that and thinking, is Baylor focusing on that too much? Could that be the trap? Because the last time that I can remember, and I might be wrong about this, that they went out on the road and then stayed on the road for a couple of days before their next game was Michigan State and Duke. And you'll recall Michigan State was not very good. They're better now, but were really in a bad way when Baylor played them. And there was this sexy matchup against Duke in Madison Square Garden on the horizon. So I think maybe there was some complacency there. Baylor ends up losing the game by 24 points. I don't think that will happen again, but we have a recipe for this already. That said, I think this is a much different, in a better way, Baylor team. And I think they are playing than it was against Michigan State. I think they're playing with a ton of confidence right now. I think they would be chomping at the bit to play Kansas again, let alone going on the road to play West Virginia. So, and the other thing is, we call it a trap for Baylor. West Virginia hosts UCF on Tuesday night, which they see as a winnable game. So maybe they're trapped playing against Baylor. I don't know. A couple different ways to look at it. I really hope this is the game that Jacoby Walter can really put it all back together, because his last 2 games have been pretty decent. Good, I'd even say. But still is missing some shots, missing a lot of shots, actually. So I'm hoping this will be a chance for him to get involved early, take a good volume of shots against what is not a very good team, and hopefully get him back on track the way the rest of the team has kind of got back on track here in the last couple of weeks. Don't know anything about Langston Love. By the time you're listening to this, we might know. We'll ask Scott about it in the morning availability, but Friday morning availability, but we don't know. I imagine he won't play in this game just because it's not the strongest opponent they've played, and they can probably afford to keep him out and rest him a little bit longer. But anyway, look out for that tomorrow. We will have coverage of these basketball games all weekend long, and then again on Monday. So let me know what you think about these games. Let me know what you think about Brittney Griner's number getting retired at the Foster Pavilion. I'm going to be there. I can't wait to see it. And just be sure to drop a comment down in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. Tell your friends about it. And thank you and thank them for making it your first listen today and every day. We'll be back in a flash with Locked On Baylor.